Common intuition suggests that healthcare markets are shaped by technology, labor, and patient demand. Yet in many U.S. states, entry is determined by something else entirely: regulatory approval. Certificate of Need laws require healthcare providers to obtain state approval before building, expanding, or acquiring certain facilities or equipment. That approval is discretionary. It is often contested, and it is frequently opposed by incumbents. This alone tells us something important. Markets that require permission to enter are not competitive by default. They are administratively gated. To understand Certificate of Need, we must treat it not as healthcare regulation, but as institutional market design. At the center of Certificate of Need is a simple mechanism: legal scarcity. In competitive markets, scarcity emerges from cost, technology, or demand. Under con regimes, scarcity is created by statute. The state determines how many hospital beds, MRI machines, surgical centers, or nursing facilities are deemed necessary for a region. Capacity beyond that level becomes illegal without approval. This transforms healthcare infrastructure from a contestable market into a rationed one. And rationing does not just limit supply, it allocates advantage. When a new entrant applies for a Certificate of Need, existing providers are typically invited to object. Incumbents may argue that new capacity is unnecessary, duplicative, or financially destabilizing. Institutionally, this is not neutral review. It is a conflict-embedded approval process. Incumbents are economically incentivized to oppose entry because entry threatens utilization, pricing power, and asset values. The regulatory system gives them a formal channel to do so. As a result, an incumbent's most valuable asset is often not clinical excellence. It is regulatory position. Once entry is restricted, economic behavior changes. Prices become less disciplined by substitution. Capacity expansion becomes slower and more strategic. Asset utilization becomes easier to maintain. In economic terms, incumbents are able to capture rents returns above what would exist in a contestable market. These rents do not always appear as overt price increases. They often appear as stable occupancy, reimbursement leverage, and protected margins on capital-intensive assets. The protection is quiet, but it is persistent. Capital responds to this environment. In con states, healthcare assets behave less like competitive businesses and more like regulated utilities. Returns depend less on operational efficiency and more on regulatory insulation. This predictability attracts consolidation capital. Large systems are better equipped to navigate approval processes, finance long timelines, and absorb regulatory risk. Smaller entrants are not. The result is structural concentration. Con regimes do not merely allow consolidation, they select for it. Even when new entry is theoretically possible, the process itself suppresses competition. Applications are expensive, timelines are uncertain, outcomes are political, litigation risk is real. From an institutional perspective, this alone is enough to deter entry. Many projects never reach the application stage. This is not incidental friction, it is structural gating. Importantly, Certificate of Need often coexists with market-based pricing. This creates a hybrid system. Prices are nominally market-driven, but supply is administratively constrained. In such systems, pricing power emerges without collusion. Providers face fewer substitutes. Competitive pressure weakens. Higher prices, limited choice, and slower responsiveness to demand are not anomalies. They are predictable outcomes. Supporters of Certificate of Need often argue that it preserves access by preventing excess capacity. Institutionally, constrained entry produces the opposite effect under stress. When demand rises through demographic shifts or public health shocks, capacity cannot adjust quickly. Approval lags become bottlenecks. Scarcity becomes visible. Access constraints are not failures of execution. They are second-order effects of fixed supply. At a structural level, Certificate of Need regimes function as state-enforced market structure. They determine who may enter, at what scale, in which locations, and under what competitive conditions. This is not marginal regulation. It is foundational architecture. Once that architecture is in place, outcomes become predictable. Consolidation, protected incumbents, pricing power, and access rigidity. These are not accidents. They are outputs of design. The analytical mistake is to evaluate con laws through moral or clinical lenses. The correct frame is institutional. If you control entry, you shape competition. If you shape competition, you shape prices, consolidation, and access. In regulated scarcity systems, behavior follows permission, and permission follows institutional design. This is not investment advice. This is not policy advocacy. This is institutional analysis. For continued examination of governance structures, regulatory architectures, and the incentive systems that govern economic reality, please subscribe.